Order. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I welcome the speech that the Secretary of State has made today, and also comment on the manner in which she has done so, often under pressure, and the considerable thoughtfulness and also integrity with which she has put her points today. I think I would give her strong support in the approach that she has taken, because today, Mr. Speaker, Parliament has the chance to support loving couples who want to get married. The chance to make some of the same-sex couples that I've spoken to in the last few weeks very happy. It means they can finally set a date for their wedding. And I hope we will support this bill today to give those couples the chance to wed, to be married, and to have their relationships celebrated and valued by the state in the same way as everyone else. I'll give way to the honourable member.
The passage of the Civil Partnership Bill in 2004, my honourable friend for Gainsborough pointed out to the honourable member for Rhondda, who sat next to her, that that bill would inevitably lead on to a gay marriage. The honourable member for Rhondda replied, "The honourable gentleman is completely mistaken. That I do not want same-sex relationships to ape marriage in any sense, because they are different. Although the two share similar elements, they do not have to be identical, so the legal provisions should be distinct." What's changed since then?
Well, the honourable member for Rhondda has since celebrated his own civil partnership as a result of that bill. I'm sure he would have happily invited the honourable member along to it had he had the chance to do so. But I want to come on to the issue about the difference between civil partnerships, because civil partnerships, I think, have been a hugely important step forward. We're proud that the Labour government introduced them some years ago, but I think it is also right that we now take the additional step and now introduce equal marriage across the country as well. Look, of course, people have strong views on marriage, on their own marriage and on other people's. And I understand that some in this House are strongly opposed to this bill, and I respect their views, although I disagree with them. And I hope that that is the spirit in which this debate will take place today. I will give way to the honourable member, and then I will give way to my honourable friend.
I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable Lady for giving way. She talks about equality. Why isn't her side of the House arguing in favour of heterosexual couples being able to access civil partnerships?
Well, I think that is a separate issue. It's one that there was no consultation on, and I'm sure that there will be a debate on that in due course at a later stage in the bill, and I know that people have different views upon it. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that the case for equal marriage is a very powerful one, and I give way to my honourable friend.
I'm very grateful to my friend. And isn't the essential point here that what was once the love that dare not speak its name now not only will have recognition in law, but will have equality before the law? And isn't that something we should be proud of as a House?
Well, my honourable friend is completely right. We should have pride in this Parliament in giving equal rights to people to be respected, to have their relationships celebrated in the same way. I'll give way to the honourable member in a second. I'll give way to my honourable friend first.
Mr. Speaker, does the Right Honourable Member agree that the institution of marriage can only be strengthened if in future all citizens enjoy equality before the law and the ability to marry the person they love, regardless of their gender?
Well, I think that my honourable friend is right. Couples who love each other should be able to get married regardless of their gender and sexuality, and we should enjoy that. We should celebrate that. We all, I think, love a good wedding. We pause and we walk by a church or a registry office and smile at the couple who are walking by, coming out in a cloud of confetti, because actually we think it's a great thing that a couple want to get married and want to celebrate that. I give way to the honourable member.
To giving way. Would she agree with me that in this wonderful, tolerant and free society we live in, that actually real equality exists when we can celebrate our differences?
Well, I think we should certainly celebrate the chance for people to get married. I think we should celebrate the fact that different couples want to get married. I think that's exactly what we should support, because it's not just about the wedding in the first place. We love a wedding. We also all love the idea of a long, stable marriage. We love the idea of a golden or diamond wedding anniversary, you know, where the couple are still caring for each other even though they're bickering over the biscuits. And we all also clearly like a good party as well. I'll give way to the honourable member.
If she's asking us to accept the bona fides of her party in terms of respecting religious freedom, why does she think it was that she failed to include views of traditional marriage as a protected characteristic in the 2010 Equality Act and failed to support the honourable gentleman for Gainsborough on the same issue last week?
Mr. Speaker, I don't think it's right for individual views within individual faiths to all be protected characteristics in the Equality Act. I don't think that was the appropriate way to go. Mr. Speaker, we all love the idea of a wedding. We all support the idea of a strong marriage. We all clearly like a good party. I noticed from the impact assessment that the department has produced, passing this legislation, they reckon, could lead to £14 million extra spent on celebrations, which is a lot of confetti and rubber chicken. Mr. Speaker, I don't think it will be quite enough to boost the economy and deliver Plan B, but I guess the Chancellor needs all the help he can get. But call us hopeless romantics, call it the triumph of hope over experience. Most of us think when people love each other, they want to make that long-term commitment. That is a wonderful thing. So why would we stop a loving couple getting married just because they are gay? I'll give way to the honourable member.
The honourable lady not agree that she's confusing marriage with weddings. They are different things. What?
I'm sorry the honourable member is so gloomy about the fun of a wedding, which most of us think is an enjoyable thing to start off a marriage, and I hope he would also be there celebrating the golden anniversary, wedding anniversary, the diamond wedding anniversary, and the long-term marriage too. I'll give way to my friend.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way. When recalling previous debates, does she recognise that many of those people who are arguing very strongly and passionately against civil partnerships just a few years ago would have no argument with them now, would recognise they've been a success, and maybe the argument in a few years' time will have moved on, we'll all be able to recognise that equality is a good thing in our country?
Well, my honourable friend is right. There are members of this House who opposed civil partnerships at the time who now strongly support them. There are members of the House of Lords, indeed bishops, who voted against civil partnerships when they were introduced, and yet many in the Church now support blessings for civil partnerships. Attitudes have changed, and it is right that they have done so, and we should support them doing so and also changing further. And it is worth... I'll give way to the honourable member, and then I want to make a little progress.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way on this issue. However, the facts paint a very different picture. Since same-sex marriages were introduced in Portugal, in Spain and the Netherlands, mixed-sex marriages have decreased quite considerably, indeed by tens and tens of thousands. Well, the facts are clear. In Spain, when it was introduced, 208 people were married in mixed-sex marriages. Last year, 161,000 people were married in mixed-sex marriages. So the numbers are actually declining, not increasing. And therefore, the introduction of this legislation could reduce the number of parties that the member appears to be interested in.
Well, I think say to the honourable member, I think if you looked at the long-term trends in marriage across a whole series of different countries, those that have same-sex marriage and those that don't, I think he would struggle to find a causal connection between the idea that some gay and lesbian couples are now able to get married has somehow meant that the heterosexual couples are all running away from the church door or the registry office. But it is worth hearing why it is that many people say they want to get married. Many gay and lesbian couples say they want to. Here's what one gay man told me. He said, "My parents have a really strong marriage. I've always seen how meaningful and important it is. We want the same thing. It's hard to explain, but it's about the value of our relationship. I want my nieces and nephews to feel that Uncle Adam and Uncle James are getting married, just like their mum and dad." Another said, We want to have the same celebration and status as our parents and grandparents. It's about being normal. I want to have children, but I believe children are better brought up in a married relationship. Someone else said, I asked the question, Simon, will you marry me? And he said yes. But I said, marry me, not would you like a civil partnership? Because civil partnerships have been a fantastic step forward, providing legal recognition for same-sex relationships for the first time, and they continue to be a source of great joy and security. It was right for Labour to introduce them in the face of deep controversy at the time, but it's also time to take the next step for equality, allow gay and lesbian couples the chance to marry if they choose to do so. Because another person married reminded me of the practical differences that some people can face when they're in a civil partnership and have to declare their sexuality every time they fill in a form such as mortgage or insurance, where there's a different box if you're in a civil partnership than if you're married. And why should they have to? Another said to me, language does matter. Marriage is universally understood as a meaningful commitment. People might say that in time civil partnerships will mean exactly the same. We say, why wait? And why should they wait for their relationship that they want to celebrate now when they could get married?
Thank you very much for giving way. I'm delighted to be supporting this debate today and to be voting for this bill. And in part because I've been overwhelmed by the number of young people, particularly in my constituency, who've been in touch with me asking me to vote for this bill today. Would my honourable friend agree with me that there's a certain element of generational issues here? Most people who've supporting this bill have been the younger members of my constituency, and I'm afraid some of those against have been at the later stage of life, shall we say.
Well, my honourable friend is right that I think there have been some of the polls have showed that around, one poll which showed I think about 2/3 of people overall supported same-sex marriage, but for those under 50 it was actually 80% who were in support of gay marriage, of equal marriage, and I think shows the strong feeling that there is on this subject, the positive feeling that there is. I give way to the honourable member.
I'd like to thank the Right Honourable Member for giving way. There's been a lot of talk about equality and fairness from both sides of the House. I wonder if the Right Honourable Lady would like to hazard a guess as to why the word equal has been taken out of the title of the bill. Maybe it's because it's not quite as equal as the government first expected.
Well, I suspect the honourable member seems to have some, obviously, detail in mind. I mean, I think the fundamental principle of this is to support equal marriage because it is to allow same-sex marriages to go ahead, and it's right that the law should do so. I'm sure there will be debates over the precise detail when we get to committee stage. A great honourable friend.
Does my honourable friend agree with me that she hopes that the House will approach this subject with some atonement? She will recognise the men and women who attended those first Pride marches in Trafalgar Square following Stonewall and were beaten by the police in the 1960s, and this House looked in the other direction. And will she pay tribute to the leaders of London councils, people like my honourable friend, the leader of the Public Accounts Committee, the member for Dulwich, former member for Brent, and indeed member for Tottenham, who stood in the face of Clause 28 because they chose to publish a book in their libraries, Jenny Lives with Eric and Martin?
Well, my honourable friend is right that there has been immense discrimination over many years, including recently, that there has been, I think, considerable prejudice that people who are gay or lesbian or bisexual have had to face, including violence as well. And this House actually has a duty, I think, to stand up against that kind of violence, but also against discrimination and in the interests of equality as well. I do want to make some progress. I'm very conscious that honourable members, many honourable members want to speak, and the restrictions are very considerable. If let me just make a little progress first, and then I promise I will allow both honourable members who are standing up opposite to intervene in a second, and I know that there was somebody else behind me wanting to intervene as well. Mr. Speaker, Parliament shouldn't stop people getting married just because they have fallen in love with someone of the same sex, and we shouldn't say that same-sex relationships are intrinsically worth less. But I know many in this House have raised objections. They've said fear that their church or faith, they fear that their church or faith will be forced to hold same-sex marriages when they don't believe in it. They've said they believe that marriage by definition through the centuries is between a man and a woman. They believe that at the heart of marriage is the biological procreation of children, and that they fear that by widening marriage it will undermine other relationships, stability and society. I disagree with each of these 4 points, each of these 4 objections, but I know they are strongly held by people whose views I respect, and so I want to address each in turn. And first is the fear that churches will be expected to support same-sex marriage in future. It is clear that they won't have to. The Secretary of State, I thought, gave a very powerful explanation of the safeguards that are in the bill for our long tradition in Britain of respecting religious freedom. It's built into our law and our traditions. I will give way in a second because I promised to give way to other members first. The number of clauses in this bill which deal directly with religion is unusual and is reflected in the decision of all parties to hold free votes on this bill. But freedom of religion is rightly protected on the face of the bill, as the Secretary of State has set out. No church or religious organisation can be required to conduct same-sex marriage. No individual minister can be required to conduct same-sex marriages. And if a religious organisation or an individual minister refuses to hold same-sex marriages, that won't count as discrimination under the Equality Act. And the Secretary of State has set out in some detail her double, triple, quadruple, even quintuple locks, and she has padlock, Yale lock, bolt, chain and even burglar alarm as well. But I hope that she will agree too that churches should be able to change their minds in future as well, to support same-sex marriage in future if they want to, without unnecessary hurdles and barriers. The Church of England and the Church of Wales have additional hurdles built into this bill, which we will need to scrutinise in committee. I'll give word to the honourable member first.
Lady, now I'd like to draw into the central issue about the understanding of marriage. She'll recognise that the institution of marriage is not simply beholden and owned by a view of the church, by a secular view, by gay, by married, by whatever. It's a social institution which is valued by all. But does she therefore then have any view that she agrees with, for example, the gay writer and blogger Richard Waghorn, who says that the understanding of marriage as an institution that exists and is supported for the sake of strong families changes, indeed, under this bill, to an understanding of marriage as merely the endpoint of romance?
I understand the point the honourable member is making, but I want to come on specifically to the point that he has made about whether or not extending marriage in this way will have an impact on wider family life or stability of society, because it is a point that I disagree with. And I would also, I think, pay tribute to I know the work that the honourable member has done in terms of tackling homophobic bullying, which I know has been important as well. I give way to the honourable member.
To the right honourable lady. In 2004, I enthusiastically voted for the Civil Partnership Bill. She didn't at that time. I'm sure she had good reasons. That gave full equality in the eyes of the law for people in same-sex relationships. Were either of us homophobic for not having gone for full marriage at that time, and what exactly has happened in those last 9 years? And is not the problem not a lack of equality in the law that we need to address, but a lack of equality in some people's eyes in society, and just changing the name of a ceremony will not address that?
Well, I would say to the honourable member, I think I've addressed this point before. I've always strongly supported civil partnerships. I think they were the right thing to do by the Labour government at the time, but I also think that attitudes have changed and moved on, and it's good that they have done so, and I think this is the right time to introduce same-sex marriage as well. I do need to make some progress because honourable members are going to want to come in. I will just finally give way to my honourable friend behind, and then I really must make progress.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, but one of the things I detect through correspondence is a fear that, contrary to the assurances that we've been given, that this bill in the future, at some later date, will be revisited and unpicked. What does my honourable friend think about that?
Well, I think that the issue about the freedom of religion, which I know is one that many honourable members have raised concerns about, is built in not just very strongly into the face of this legislation, but also into our traditions, into our long-term political history, and is something that we have always valued, and I suspect Parliament will always want to defend. And there are further safeguards in Article 9 of the European Convention. I agree with the Secretary of State. I think that it is inconceivable that the European Court would tell compel a church or faith group to hold same-sex marriages, despite many other countries across Europe already conducting same-sex marriages, such as Spain, Portugal, Belgium and others. There have been no successful challenges in the European courts, and she is right that the European Court also allows for a wide margin of appreciation. We will want specifically to discuss at committee some of the issues around, for example, the church in Wales, where if they decide to support gay marriage in future, it would still be subject to a potential veto by the Lord Chancellor and would require a separate vote in both Houses of Parliament. I hope that can be looked at committee stage. But religious freedom, Mr. Speaker, goes both ways. Churches that object should not be required to sign up to same-sex marriage, but nor should they be able to block everyone else from doing so, because other people do want to. The polling has found a majority of people wanting to be able to support same-sex marriage. The Quakers, the Unitarians, Reform Jews all want to be able to celebrate same-sex marriages. The government originally ruled this out. We argued religious marriages should be included if organisations want to, and I welcome the government's change of heart on this. Because let us be clear, no one group or organisation or faith or institution owns marriage. Religious organisations should not be required to hold same-sex marriage, but nor in the spirit of freedom of religion should they prevent other religious organisations or the state from doing so. The second objection that's been raised, Mr. Speaker, is some have argued that marriage by definition has always been between a man and a woman for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, and therefore should remain so. For some, that is their faith, and they will be able to have their faith respected as part of this bill. But that's not a reason not to change the law, because it's hardly surprising that for thousands of years, same-sex couples weren't allowed to marry when they weren't even allowed to exist. Same-sex was illegal, never mind same-sex marriage. Legal sex, by definition, had to be between a man and a woman, also for thousands of years, but no one says we should turn that clock back. So we cannot hide discrimination simply by calling it a definition. Marriage has changed many times over the centuries, and thank goodness, for hundreds of years, women were treated as property in marriage, handed from their father to their husband and denied rights of their own. Until the 1990s, women's bodies were effectively treated as their husband's property. If a husband raped his wife, it wasn't even treated as a crime. And civil marriage was introduced over 170 years ago, and that was pretty radical at the time, but now 160,000 of us get married in a civil ceremony every year. Marriage has changed before, and it should change again. But third, some have said they oppose same-sex marriage because they believe that marriage is by definition about the procreation of children. But not in civil marriage it isn't, and hasn't been for over a century. Many marriages are childless. We don't stop people who are too old or too sick to have children from getting married. We don't do fertility tests at the altar. And yes, in vast numbers of families, marriage is an important starting point for a loving family, bringing up children. But gay couples bring up children too. And as people live longer, the family commitments involved in marriage are much wider than bringing up children. Most MPs will know the sadness, but also the inspiration that they have drawn from visiting a long-married couple, where the wife, for example, is now struggling to cope, struggling to remember the world around her, struggling to recognise even the husband she has shared decades of her life with. Yet he carries on, cooking for her, washing for her, getting her up, putting her to bed, talking to her even as she becomes a stranger in front of him. And that is marriage. But I also visited a gay man who died some years ago after a long illness, in which he was cared for every day, at home, in hospital, eventually in a hospice, by his long-term gay partner. And I don't see why that can't be marriage too. The idea that the biology of procreation should deny same-sex couples the respect that comes with marriage is to ignore the full richness, the happiness, and also the tragedies of family life. For better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, that is marriage. And so finally, for those who argue that extending marriage to include same-sex couples will somehow weaken or undermine marriage and stability for everyone else, I just profoundly disagree. Marriage has changed many times before. Society hasn't collapsed. Other countries are doing it. Their churches and their societies haven't fallen apart. Spain, Catholic Spain, has had same-sex marriage since 2004. Denmark, Belgium, Canada, Norway, Portugal, Argentina, South Africa all celebrate same-sex marriage. France, just last week, passed the first vote on the way to same-sex marriage. The President of the United States is in favour of equal marriage too. If the same-sex couples who've told me of their love for each other are able to get married, that won't weaken marriage, it will strengthen it. And it certainly won't make it any less likely that the heterosexual couple with kids who live next door to them will stay together. If marriage is to stay relevant, to stay important, to remain a crucial part of our family and social relationships, it also has to remain in tune with the values of every generation. And that means it should keep up with rightly changing attitudes towards homosexuality too. Because the truth is that gay and lesbian couples have been locked out of too much for too long. I give way to the honourable member.
Grateful to the Right Honourable Lady for giving way. I wonder if she would accept that there is a kind of inevitability about what we are, many of us, hoping to decide here this evening. We discriminated against women, we discriminated against Catholics, we've discriminated against people from ethnic minorities, but very gradually, not always completely, but perceptibly, this House has passed legislation to remove such discrimination. Is not this evening yet another example and opportunity to do so?
The Right Honourable Member is right that this is, I think, the next step on a journey, but it is the right one, and we should not resist the values, I think, of the majority of people now across the country who will support same-sex marriage now. The truth is that I think we have discriminated for too long. People were locked up, punished for loving someone of the same sex until the 1960s. Gay men told by the Home Secretary, even in the 1950s, they were a plague on this country. Lesbian women forced to hide their relationships. Teenagers bullied at school with no protection. Teenage teachers until the early 90s unable to tell the child of a same-sex couple that their family was okay for fear that it would breach Section 28. So much has changed in a short time too. Labour in government equalised the age of consent, ended the ban on LGBT people serving in our armed forces, made homophobia a hate crime, things that were controversial at the time yet now have widespread support. And that is why I'm pleased that the vast majority of Labour MPs have said they want to support this bill today. We have come a long way, but with each step forward, the sky hasn't fallen in. Family life hasn't fallen apart, and the predictions that passionate opponents made at the time simply have not come true. Those opponents, in the most part, have changed their minds and moved on. I hope the same will be true again. I give way one final time to my honourable friend.
Would it not be appropriate on this day when we're debating this subject to bear in mind, amongst all those people that were persecuted, Alan Turing, one of the most distinguished scientists of all, committed suicide arising from the harassment he suffered as a homosexual. He shouldn't be remembered. He should be remembered along with so many other people persecuted and disgraced simply because of their sexuality.
Well, my honourable friend is right, and I think we should as a society feel deeply ashamed of what happened to Alan Turing, who was a hero for this country. I hope, Mr. Speaker,
I hope it is not a point of frustration from the honourable gentleman, but point of order, Mr. David Davis.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable lady is taking interventions from her bench. If she's confident of her arguments, why won't she take interventions from this side of the House?
Point, but it's not a point of order, but he's put it on the record. Yvette Cooper.
I have to say to the honourable member that I have taken interventions from many sides, and given the number of people on his side of the House who are desperate to speak in this debate, I am very keen to allow them the opportunity to do so, even given the strong disagreements that they clearly have with each other. Mr. Speaker, the opponents of measures in the past have changed their minds often and moved on. I hope the same will be true again, and I hope opponents today will look back in 10 years and won't be able to remember what the fuss was about. So today, Let's vote for people to be able to marry, for the sake of those couples who really want to wed, for the sake of the Quakers, the Unitarians and other religious organisations who want to celebrate same-sex marriage as part of our respect for freedom of faith, for the sake of equality, removing unfair discrimination and challenging prejudice, and for the sake of marriage, to keep it inclusive and in touch for the next generation. In marriage, let us celebrate, not discriminate. Let's be on the right side of history, and let's vote for this bill today.